Hey everyone, I'm Joe. Welcome back to Sip and Talk. So we heard from some listeners in Taiwan saying they sometimes, can't quite follow our Mandarin. Don't worry, guys. Sometimes we can't either. Seriously, though, the global situation, it's just changing so fast these days. It's kind of wild.
You can say that again. Feels like you blink and bam, something huge has shifted.
Totally. Like the stock market 1 minute, it's giving everyone the blues. The next, Zoom, like mainline espresso. What's the lowdown this week?
Well, today on the deep dive, we're going to zero in on the latest with Trump's tariffs. We've gathered some info, trying to make sense of where things actually stand right now. So the goal today is really to get a clearer picture of the whole situation with these trade policies.
Tariffs, yeah. Always tariffs. Feels like they're constantly in the news, right? So what's the fresh info on that front?
Okay, let's dive right in. So first off, the U.S. stock market had a pretty strong rebound, May 28th. That was the first trading day this week. The Dow Jones, it shot up by a solid 740 points. That's, pretty significant, especially after some shaky periods. And the S&P, NASDAQ, even the Philly Semiconductor Index, they all saw some decent gains too.
Whoa, 740 points. That's a big jump. So what was driving that? Was it something specific about the tariffs or...
Doesn't seem like it was directly the tariffs. It feels more like the market was just, shaking off some of that pessimism from April and early May, maybe some better economic news or companies revising forecasts upwards. Something shifted the mood. But obviously, hanging over everything is the ongoing tariff situation under the Trump administration. And yeah, just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, he's the U.S. president in 2025, so these policies are still front and center.
Right, President Trump. Okay, so any, new tariff actions actually happening? Are more things getting slapped with tariffs?
Yeah, a couple of key things to flag. First, those U.S.-EU trade talks, they've been pushed back again, now scheduled for July 9th. And apparently, the U.S. is really leaning on the EU to loosen up their regulations on tech companies.
Of the tech regulations, right?
Yeah, things like how they handle big online platforms, data privacy, areas where the U.S. feels the EU rules are maybe a bit too restrictive.
Always a hot topic, big tech regulation. So what about China? Any progress there? That trade war felt like it was never going to end.
That's a really crucial point. Most analysts seem to think the U.S.-China trade war isn't really resolved. It's more like paused, with the potential to flare up again pretty quickly. And there's this specific worry floating around about tariffs on semiconductors. The chips that run basically everything.
Yeah, everything.
Some folks are calling potential semiconductor tariffs a, quote, time bomb for the Taiwanese stock market, because Taiwan is just such a huge player in making those advanced chips.
Time bomb. Yikes.
If those tariffs actually hit, it could really shake things up for Taiwan's economy and, global supply chains.
Okay, so a semiconductor time bomb. Not good. What's the overall strategy here? It sometimes feels a bit scattered, these tariff moves.
Well, the trend seems to be the U.S. using tariffs more and more to kind of nudge companies, encourage them to assemble products in the U.S. using American-made parts.
The bring manufacturing home push.
Exactly. And that shift is actually pushing countries like Japan and the EU to speed up their own trade talks, probably so they don't get left behind or put at a disadvantage if the U.S. keeps adding tariffs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like a defensive move, almost. What about other key partners? I think I saw something about South Korea recently.
Yeah, things seem a little tense on the U.S.-South Korea front. President Trump is apparently considering a potential 25% tariff on South Korean goods. And at the same time, there's this talk about potential dialogue with North Korea, which, understandably has Seoul feeling a bit anxious, worried about being sidelined.
Yeah, tough spot for South Korea. Caught in the middle. Now, you mentioned Apple before. What's the latest with them? Trump's been talking about iPhones made in the USA for ages.
Right, Apple's definitely still in the spotlight. President Trump's been pretty consistent. He wants iPhone production moved back to the U.S. And if that doesn't happen, he's floating this possible 25% tariff specifically on their products, iPhones, iPads, the 3C stuff, computers, communication, consumer electronics.
25% on iPhones. Wow.
Yeah. And it's important to note this is talked about as a separate tariff, maybe specifically on tech products, not just layered on top of existing component tariffs. The thinking behind it seems to be about pushing for critical supply chains, especially military and AI-related ones, to come back to the U.S. for security reasons.
Okay, so really trying to force their hand on U.S. manufacturing.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that make iPhones crazy expensive?
Oh, absolutely. The estimates suggest just moving the final assembly to the U.S., not even the whole component network, could increase the cost by maybe 6 to 8%.
Yeah.
Moving the entire supply chain, that would be a much, much bigger financial hit. It's incredibly complex.
Yeah, I bet. That's got to hurt Apple's margins. I seem to remember Tim Cook and Trump having a, well, maybe not best friends, but a functional relationship, right?
That's kind of the perception, yeah. Tim Cook seems to have navigated that relationship pretty carefully. But at the end of the day, their goals are probably different. Cook likely focuses on Apple's efficiency, its global supply chain, profitability, while Trump's priority is clearly bringing jobs and manufacturing back stateside.
So different objectives lead to continued pressure.
Seems like it. That difference is probably why Trump keeps pushing Apple for more U.S. investment in production.
Okay, so tariffs are still the main tool? Switching gears slightly, I've seen polls suggesting Trump's approval ratings are kind of holding steady despite all the noise and controversies. How does that play into his ability to actually implement these tariff policies?
That's a really important piece of the puzzle. Despite, various legal challenges and controversies, his approval numbers have shown some resilience. He seems to maintain a strong base of support. And that support likely translates into political capital to pursue his domestic agenda, which definitely includes these trade actions.
Interesting. So even with debates raging, he feels he has the backing to push forward.
Seems that way. And we've also seen the Supreme Court uphold several policies from his earlier administration that lower courts had initially blocked. Things like dismissing heads of independent agencies, the transgender military service ban, ending temporary protected status for Salvadorans. Those rulings sort of reinforce the power of his executive actions.
Okay, so he has a relatively solid foundation to act from, policy-wise. Now, this might seem like a left turn, but I also saw some chatter about Apple maybe falling behind in the whole artificial intelligence race. Any connection there to tariffs or the manufacturing pressure?
It's an interesting angle. While the tariffs aren't directly causing any AI lag at Apple, you could argue the overall pressure restructuring manufacturing, investing more in the U.S. might indirectly affect R&D priorities, resource allocation, that kind of thing. Reports do suggest Apple faced some challenges getting up to speed with AI, maybe starting a bit late, some initial hesitation maybe from software leadership about investing heavily in the needed GPUs.
GPUs, right? The graphics cards that power AI.
Exactly. Plus maybe some leadership shuffles, team integration issues, and apparently the first attempt to integrate generative AI, the kind that creates text or images, into Siri didn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah, I haven't noticed Siri getting that much smarter lately, to be honest.
Well, they seem to be making big moves now to catch up. Buying lots of those powerful NVIDIA GPUs, exploring partnerships with companies like Perplexity to improve search. There's even a sense that last year's Apple Intelligence marketing push didn't quite land, suggesting they're still working on getting it right.
So trying to catch up in AI while dealing with pressure to potentially move iPhone manufacturing, that's a lot on their plate. Could the tariff threat actually push them to invest more in AI R&D here in the U.S., maybe, as a show of commitment?
It's possible, yeah. The pressure to invest domestically could certainly extend beyond just factories. But the reports also suggest it might be tough for Apple to catch up to leaders like OpenAI and Google if they only rely on their own internal development.
Right. Those guys have a huge head start. What about Elon Musk? He's always got something going on in tech. Anything relevant here?
Oh, absolutely. Musk is apparently in battle mode, really focused on his AI company, XAI, plus X, formerly Twitter and Tesla. There's even some buzz about potentially merging X and XAI. And XAI's next big AI model, Grok 3.5, is coming soon. The goal there is apparently a world model, AI that can reason about the physical world.
A world model. Okay.
And to power all this, XAI is reportedly planning a massive new data center, needing something like 1 million GPUs.
1 million GPUs. That's an insane amount of computing power. What are they going to do with all that?
Well, besides training these super advanced AI models, Tesla's planning to launch its robotaxi service, maybe as early as June.
Robotaxis in June? Seriously?
That's the plan. And their Optimus robot, the humanoid one. It's apparently learning household tasks. There's talk of a home version maybe early next year and full business operations by 2030. Musk is definitely pushing hard on AI and robotics.
Wow. Robotaxis, robot butlers. Feels like the future is arriving fast. But all that AI must use a ton of electricity, right? Does that tie back to energy policy or tariffs?
It absolutely does. That's becoming a huge point of discussion. The rapid growth in AI is driving this massive surge in energy demand. Training these models, running them 24/7, it takes enormous amounts of power. And there's a real concern that traditional energy sources, even renewables, might struggle to keep up.
Yeah, I can see that.
In fact, Elon Musk himself has publicly predicted potential electricity shortages maybe as soon as mid-2026, purely because of AI's energy appetite.
Whoa, electricity shortages.
Yeah.
Seriously. Are we going to be back to candles because of AI?
Lightly. Hopefully not. But recognizing this need, the Trump administration has apparently issued an executive order promoting U.S. nuclear energy development. The goal is ambitious, quadrupling nuclear output by 2050. And interestingly, you see a bit of a shift in Europe, too. Some countries seem to be softening their stance against nuclear power, likely driven by similar energy security concerns.
Nuclear power.
Yes.
That's always controversial. I know it's a really sensitive topic in Taiwan as well.
It definitely is. And while the recent decommissioning of a unit at Taiwan's nuclear power plant number 3 might have limited immediate impact, those future energy needs from AI, that's a big question mark for them. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang even weighed in, called energy the biggest challenge for AI, and suggested Taiwan should, consider investing in nuclear.
The guy making the AI brain says we need more nuclear. That certainly carries weight. But the old problems are still there, right? Waste disposal, safety.
Absolutely. Those challenges haven't gone away. What do you do with the nuclear waste? The risk of accidents, however small. The incredibly high cost of building new plants. These are still major hurdles. Plus, geopolitical risks, wars, and even some wild ideas like shooting waste into space raise safety questions. And practical nuclear fusion power, that's still a long way off.
Okay, so it's all connected, isn't it? Tariffs impacting supply chains, AI booming and needing huge amounts of power, which leads back to tricky energy choices like nuclear.
It really is interconnected. So to kind of wrap it up, we're seeing the Trump administration stick with tariffs as a major trade tool, ongoing talks and tensions with the EU, China, South Korea, specific pressure on companies like Apple to manufacture in the U.S. And all this is happening while technology, especially AI, is just exploding, creating unprecedented energy demands and forcing a serious look at all energy options, including nuclear.
So these tariff decisions could ripple out massively, hitting global trade, tech companies like Apple, the vital Taiwanese chip industry, and even shaping our future energy grid because of AI's hunger for power. All right, that is definitely a lot to digest. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to Sip and Talk. And speaking of things to check out, our friend Micky has some new wine videos up on his YouTube channel. But here's the funny part. They've somehow turned into English lessons. Apparently, one of our substitute hosts had to step in and kind of save the day. It sounds pretty hilarious, honestly. You should definitely go check it out for a laugh.
Yeah, do that. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering this huge energy demand coming from AI, tangled up with these complex tariff policies shaking up global supply chains, what kind of fundamental shifts, in how countries work together and in technological innovation itself are going to be absolutely necessary to navigate what's coming?